Hello, everybody. We are today talking to a lot of the teams from the Fall xAPI cohort, and I'm going to bring people on the screen in a bit. But first, I wanted to give a little brief introduction. I'm not sure if anyone is unfamiliar with the xAPI cohort, but if you are not familiar with it, it's a program run by Torrance Learning. Megan's a huge champion of it. She puts this on for the community, and it's incredible. Different groups put together projects, just kind of passion projects, things that they want to work on, things that they need help figuring out in this structured setting. So each week you have a webcast about xAPI topics, and each week the groups talk about what they did that week. So a lot of people join, fewer people survive, I would say. And we have 6 to 7, I lost track, groups represented here to talk about their projects. So I'm not going to talk too much at the beginning. I'm just going to bring people on and let you hear from them. So if you can, there is a poll. I see some people did find it. It's, have you joined the xAPI cohort in the past? So some people have joined, many more people have joined and lurked. You get access to a Slack group, so you get to see what people are working on, get to kind of absorb that knowledge. And today we'll tell you what it's like to actually take part in it. So I'm going to bring on a few people to talk about, we're just going to introduce the groups, and I'm not going to do a rundown of the people beforehand. I'll let them introduce themselves. So first we have Izzy and Brian, who worked on Team Alexa. And then after that, we're going to have Joanne. So I'm going to invite all of them on screen. Hello, Izzy and Brian. How are you?
Hi, great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about the projects that you guys worked on for the xAPI cohort.
Brian, why don't you take it? Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, so we worked on Team Alexa. I had done a few previous Alexa projects for the cohort. And so this one, for this fall cohort, we decided to take on kind of a new idea that Alexa would act as a customer calling in, and the learner would act as a customer service representative. So as the Alexa gave them information about a computer issue that they were having, they could respond in a few different ways. And then from there kind of branched out into a troubleshooting skill that Alexa was giving. And along the way, tracked all of the getting xAPI statements for each of the interactions. So each time they answered a certain way, we were getting that information back. And then at the end, a full sort of report about the score, how well they did, and then provide feedback to the learner as well about some mistakes that they made.
I really like this project because I worked in customer service, and there's that portion where you have to do role playing with these people who you just met, and it can be really embarrassing. So I like that very low stakes introduction to that topic.
Absolutely.
So what made you, are each of your backgrounds in kind of IT customer service training?
No.
No.
So what made you think this?
The idea sort of came out from the previous projects we had done, sort of a how-to skill, a multiple choice quiz. And this time I was really looking for what's a unique way that to provide an interaction for a learner that can't be done somewhere else, right? Like actually using our voice, actually hearing somebody and having to listen and then respond. That was kind of I wanted to go with that unique angle, and that seemed like the easiest way to sort of use that voice-to-voice interaction was a customer service interaction.
Yeah, like I think originally we wanted to, we were trying to make it sort of include some natural language processing in there, but obviously that was going to be a little bit tougher than we anticipated. So that's why we were like, well, if we're going to make this work, we're going to have to give people some options to choose from, and that way they can sort of move on in the flow.
Great. How much do you think your goals changed between that first cohort meeting and the last one where you were like ready for your presentation?
I don't think they changed very much.
No, I mean, the biggest one was we wanted to go with the natural language processing. And then after a little bit of research, realized that was going to be a big thing to tackle in the 10 weeks or whatever we had. And so I had to pare it down. But I think once we get to that spot, it was really just getting the work done. And we didn't really have to change too much, which was good.
Very cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. I'm going to kick you off and rotate more in, and we will hear from you in a bit. Thank you. And for the audience, if you have any questions as we go, please put it in Ask a Question as you think about it. I'm going to try to save time for questions, and this will be a logistical, I'm not going to say nightmare, but just keep your questions going so I know what we're looking at the end. So Joanne, can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Okay, I come from a K-12 background and with XML. And this year I just became a grandmother. And so I've been doing xAPI projects, but I was coming across the profile. And so xAPI has what's profiles like for assessments or video. And I saw the early childhood one. So I thought, oh, this would be a great way to get my head back around early childhood education. But mainly I like it because it's very challenging in that it doesn't fit the learning management system model. It's really, you have no, you don't have that kind of technology. So they're really looking for the sensors and those types of technology. So I thought that would be most challenging. And so then I set out to, okay, I was going to be able to capture this with this sensor and with this scanner. And it didn't go that way because it's just, the technology itself just gets so challenging. And for me, I felt the most important thing that I can bring to this is really getting to understand what the statements are and what is the valuable data that xAPI can provide. And then that's where I really feel like that early childhood education environment really opens up xAPI for really what it's meant to be. Get out of the LMS, get into the experience. And so I just thought the challenge was so exciting. And so I ended up just doing like a simple prototype with straight HTML with drop downs and things like that. But it enabled me to really get hands-on experience with my grandson as I was like watching him and doing the care interactions and the learning interactions, and then trying to report back to my kids at the end of the night. It's like, well, what happened during the day? And it was like, oh my gosh, it was such a busy day. But it's like, how do we continue the learning that happened during the day? He learned so much, and I want that to be continued in the home. But it's like, if we don't have that communication, we're not capturing that data to give back to them. There's such a gap, and there's so much in brain research too that we can give information to. And so it's like, I really feel like xAPI is a solution for early childhood.
I really, really liked your project, and I think most people know I have a 3-year-old. I talk about her constantly. Yeah. She's perfect. But she did have an issue with biting at some point. So perfect except for that. And it was challenging to work with daycare because I kept wanting to know more about when those incidents happened. Was it before lunchtime? Could she have been hungry? Was it before nap time? Trying to get those kind of time sensitive details. And it's hard for them to remember because it's just a flurry of like diapers and milk and all of these things. And so I really, really like that application of like, this is what happened. I have another guest now. This is what happened. And then you can start tying that data together in ways that are really valuable for families.
Right. Did the nap, not having a nap, impact, what happened later on during the day? Or why did that fight happen, between those two children?
Right. Yeah, it's those things that you're just constantly trying to piece together. They're like a, mystery. It's like a crime scene every day. Well, that's a really, really cool project. I'm really excited about it. Actually, I had mentioned before, I told my sister-in-law, who's a daycare teacher, and she said, do they have the same thing for milk?
That's it. Yeah, that's what I was trying to develop. Yeah. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because that I remember those times like you have to use the blue bottle first because that's the milk that's from the freezer, so use that before any other milk, and then
and then you have to wean them off, so it's like first they're doing that, this type of bottle, and then they're going to sippy cups, and
I like
that.
Adding that in the context, so she drank milk from this kind of bottle.
Exactly. Right.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining. We'll hear a little bit. Okay. We'll hear some later. But now I want to turn to Stephen, who worked on interactive video. And this is a fun project because it was storyline based, and I think that's something everyone deals with at least a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm Stephen McBroom. I'm an online program manager for NCETA, which is a continuing medical education office at the UNT Health Science Center in Fort Worth, Texas. And the reason that I wanted to do this project was I was in a cohort last year, and we learned how to make statements in storyline and get the interaction. I wanted to actually implement it in a real life project for our health clinic. So we do a monthly module every month for our health clinic. One of the biggest problems is our learning management system it's called Rivent, but we really can't capture data within the module itself. We can capture pre and post test data, but as far as SCORM goes, you can't do anything with it. The reason we have to use it is because we have so many different certificates we have to give out for our learners because they range from many different health professions. And so the xAPI really gave me an opportunity to start collecting data that we can actually use within the modules. We do everything in storyline as far as interactions go. We use Rise as our delivery platform, which we embed into our learning management system. So I thought this was a great opportunity to try this out in a real project with real learners and see how it goes. So what I did was I created the learning module itself was about handling difficult encounters in the ambulatory clinic setting. So handling patients who come in with their life, and sometimes their life is ugly or it's messy, and sometimes you get confronted with it. And so we had a video scenario where a patient is running late, they come in, they miss their appointment time, and then how does the CSR and the supervisor handle the patient interaction without escalating it to the point of having to contact a security officer. So there were 3 branches in the video. They had to make a choice between 2 statements on how either the CSR or the supervisor would react to the patient. And then based on that choice, they either got a video that showed them the proper good way of handling it, or a negative kind of heated situation would occur. And as they went through, each time they made the decision, then the statements would be collected, and then we could go into the learning record store and then verify what their answers were. So that was kind of what the project was for me. I wanted to keep it simple. I didn't want to make it hard, because I wanted to be able to capture this data and let it make sense for me. Next time, definitely going to make it a little harder, but for this time, just something simple that the learners weren't going to be too distracted by knowing the fact that they were having this data collected, which I'll go into later. But it was a really cool project, and I was just glad to actually use xAPI in a real life situation that I was pulling data that we could actually use in our business. So that in itself was fun, just having it become more applicable rather than just being a project for the cohort.
Yeah, I like that you were able to dovetail it into something that has practical application that you needed to practice. Did that help you, since you've done a cohort before, did that help you with meeting those weekly goals and keeping your momentum up?
It really did. And, I wasn't as nervous, and I didn't have as many frustrations because I kind of knew we used xAPI in our first cohort. I used it on this one as well. So I knew the software. I was able to create the statements with relative ease. I had a little difficulty on where I was going to place the statements, but I can talk about that when we get to the issues point. But, overall, it wasn't bad at all.
And for your previous cohort, had you also used Rise, or did you use?
At the very end, I used Rise because we had just gone in, because xAPI has different mechanisms for whenever you put out your actual code, whether it's hold on. Whether it was a standalone course, a LMS with a sidecar, or they have an original method, which was going in and messing with the actual code. So I did a standalone course since I don't have single sign-on users. But based on that, how you exported it from xAPI kind of made the decision for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very cool. Well, thank you. And thank you for joining. And I'm excited to hear more about it. Okay, I think we might have lost J-Rock.
Are you still got me?
Oh, well, we have a picture of your face, but your profile picture is wonderful. So we might as well just talk to that.
Okay. Well, hopefully you can still hear me. Yeah, I had my whole computer like crap out on me when we were in the green room. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. So while you enjoy my PNG of whatever I chose. Oh yeah, it's the one with the sunglasses, right?
It's the sunglasses, yeah.
Well, that one looks pretty cool. Probably looks cooler than I look right now. So we'll go with that. Our project started on a whim. We, if you're part of the xAPI cohort, there is a weekly Adobe Connect meeting. And the chat is kind of like it is here in TLDC. It's really off the chain. And sometimes people can meander. And I don't know if it was Anthony Altieri or Aaron Cruz or somebody has made something about Dungeons and Dragons. Can we get statements from a tabletop role-playing game? And so I thought, hey, there seems to be people who knew how to do this. I just kind of on a lark, I set up the channel and invited everybody to come. And I got, 3 people to join me, but none of us had ever actually really played Dungeons and Dragons. So we had a lot of learning to do. It was kind of a crazy gonzo idea. I think it has practical application too, because there are a lot of things that we have to do that happen only in the real world or in our heads that aren't hooked up through storyline to an LMS. And how do you judge those? How do you capture data that can help you make good decisions? And so we decided, let's try it. Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is kind of in the zeitgeist right now. There's like celebrities in Critical Role and other, podcasts and stuff. And so we totally bit off more than we could chew on purpose.
That's the way to do it, I think. Especially when it's something as experimental as how can you quantify an inherently, narrative, qualitative activity like D&D, which is, in terms of games, the least structured game I can think of.
You can do absolutely anything, right?
Right.
But so how do you, maybe your focus is on leadership training and you want to be able to track how does somebody lead a meeting, and maybe have somebody that's using an app or whatever to make decisions and rate them on how it's going, that kind of stuff. These soft skills or like these wide open things. Supposedly that's what xAPI could do, was generate training statements for things that weren't just click true or false, right? That things that happen in the real world are events that we can find a way to capture and start looking at the data. And so I thought Dungeons and Dragons, that might be kind of fun. My team is called xAPI Dragon Stats. And it was the lion's share of the work was trying to figure out what we were going to do. And when we get the technical stuff, we can do, like, we had a ton of ideas and went in a bunch of different directions. And we did not wind up with a final finished product that people could use out the gate. But I told my team ahead of time, that's okay. This may be more than a 3-month assignment. This might be something that takes us longer to do. And just as long as everybody's okay with that, let's giddy up,
Yeah. And so if you are listening and you have played D&D and you actually know about it, that's the team to join. So your finished product actually ended up as more of a training tool than I had initially thought it would be when you first presented it in the first meeting, because there is that ability to quantify. There's a TLDC regular, Karen North, famously, when she plays D&D, just sets things on fire. That's her whole strategy.
I gotta play with her.
Torch, set stuff on fire. So you could, kind of, there's a way to maybe quantify how far you've gotten away from what the DM intended for you to do. How many times you had a fire, how many times you encountered certain characters or certain.
Well, we honed it down to 2 main things. We put in the mindset of a new player that got invited to join maybe a group that's been playing already. And what, besides just what are the rules, we thought the 2 main questions would be, how do I do a good job of just playing at the table? How do I not annoy everybody? How do I be a fun player to join? And the other thing is, how do I play well my role? Both as far as like the acting portion of the game, but also like if you have chosen a certain type of character, they have more strategic abilities to do a certain type of function in the group. Like if you want to be Gandalf and be like the wizard, you're not going to charge the big monster with your sword out because you'll get squashed flat because wizards don't have armor. So stuff like that. So we designed in storyline something you could use on an iPad or something. The proctor could observe somebody playing, and it has some tabs and it has some decisions where it says based on what role they chose, what did they do when this happened? Did they tend to charge the enemy? Did they tend to stay back, or did they stay with the group? One of the main rules is never split the party. I'm learning that's like like on the 10 D&D commandments, number 1 is thou shalt not split the party. So as we were learning these things, putting those into the assessment, and then had to design actually an adventure that ideally could be played in one sitting that we could run multiple people through. So that was kind of a control. And then an intervention, a storyline intervention where we could start doing A/B testing, where it's like these newbies didn't have the training and here's how they performed. These people had the training first, here's how they performed. Or do a Leroy Jenkins button. I love it, Eric. Maybe have them play it once, and then based on their performance, just recommend certain modules from the intervention and say, okay, well, you perform these things well, but here's some things you might want to take this part of the training on before your next session and see if that makes a difference. So
I like it as like a placement test for, say you have, I'm thinking of like the more Magic the Gathering, huge groups and group activities where you can sit people down at first and be like, okay, you tend to play this way. This DM is very, organized and doesn't like being totally thrown off of their game. So I'm not going to put you with them.
Yeah.
With this one. That's very cool. So we will hear more about it. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for joining. I'm going to kick you off, and we're going to hear from Eric.
Great, thank you. So I'm Eric Schneider. I'm a learning technology manager here with Train in Davidson, North Carolina, and I've been participating in the xAPI cohorts since the spring of last year. Kind of found my way to it. Well, I've had a long-standing interest in xAPI, but also I've been a Unity 3D developer for quite a long time too, because it's just such a rich media platform, whether you do 2D interactive simulations, or you can go right into 3D equipment simulations. And so kind of bringing the two pieces together, the ability to track everything in this open world type environment into the Unity space seemed like a perfect fit. So when I joined the cohort and I saw the work that was done by, I think it's Stuart Claggett with the GBL, or game-based learning xAPI, that was really a trigger for me jumping in, because quite honestly, I didn't have to write all of that amazing code, which had always been kind of a barrier. I'm kind of more on the designer side, but I know enough coding to be dangerous in Unity. But I was really, thankful that was already established and proven. And so I thought, okay, this is a good chance to open up the box and really understand how are the statements coming from Unity, how are they being generated, and can I set up and emulate that environment? And so I took the approach of an open sandbox, because that way at least it would be accessible and welcoming to anybody who wanted to join. I know there's a lot of discussions around, what is the theme of our game going to be? I wanted to say, well, it's any game you want to make, but let's all start from the same fundamental building blocks. Let's see if we can all get on board with the base code, because this time goes so fast that we have together, these 3-month cohorts. Before you know it, they're over, and Unity can consume a lot of that time. So I thought in kind of a more of a brainstorming approach, we used something called MindMeister. We kind of mapped out all of the different elements that could possibly take place in a 3D world, because it's everything from coding to building 3D models to the xAPI components to the LRS servers. And by just mapping all that out, it looks a little overwhelming at first, but it allowed us to have our ongoing meetings and jump in at any time. So the real message that I would share there is, yes, Unity 3D is pretty extensive, but in the context of attaching xAPI statements in this world, it's actually really easy to jump in, because we're going to try to keep this project going by doing the heavy lifting. I'm glad that we have something like GitHub, because now that means I can check in the latest, greatest files. I can walk away for a week. Someone else can come in and pick up right where we left off. And so to me, the sandbox is really just the discussion platform for what you want to bring to the table. So we had one person, it was Jay Leone from the xAPI cohort. He was brave enough to jump in, and he was very open up front and said, you know what, I just don't know Unity. I'd like to learn more, but he's a great coder. And so our weekly meetings we call them hackathons, because it's really just a nice way of saying, hey, what problems are you having this week? Where are you stuck? And so he taught me some coding pieces right off the bat, like that I was stuck with, and understanding some fundamental C# programming concepts, which once you build them once, you just park that and you just reuse these components. So the idea of reusable content became another theme that we took away from this experience. Whereas I was able to say, hey, try the Pro Builder. It's a free plugin which allows you to create geometry without having to be an engineer or 3D modeler. So what we're learning is it's just a great platform for building and designing your concepts. And then the xAPI part is, the fundamental piece is from GBL, but it really comes back to you of how do you want to implement that. So we started getting into the strategy of level design and objective design. Okay, so what that means is if you open up Unity, it's just a blank slate. If you define it as a level, then you can put any number of objectives in that level. And if you complete those objectives, you move to the next level. Now, this is where, and I'll just kind of I'll just throw a little bit into the Unity side. It has built-in tools like physics. So in traditional animation, you'd have to click every object and make it move. With physics, you just turn it on and everything interacts and is clickable, draggable, bounces off itself. So you can think of objectives as very complex scenarios, And then in xAPI terms, I threw the ball into the basket, 3 times. That would be a completed objective. But everything's bouncing, moving, and can be built into any scene. So that's kind of where we left off. The sandbox concept means that if Jay wants to go off and build a game, or maybe John wants to come in and put D&D in there, we hope to have the framework where the components that you find in Unity are going to be talking to each other the minute you start. So then you could really focus on your vision or your dream for the final outcome. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. The takeaway message is, if you've never seen Unity, or you're a Unity expert who've already delivered many titles, this is a great place to come in and interact, because there's enough room for everybody to contribute. So I'll leave it at that for the moment.
So just to make sure I understand it right, the idea of tying a statement to physics would make it so they're a little bit more standardized. So it's not like it bounced off of this and.
Yeah, you define what you want to see happen. Now you just have all of these tools in the toolbox to allow you to achieve that result. So I use the ball in the basket one because it's kind of an object interacting with another object. The way physics works is everything detects if something collides with something else. So if a character's walking on the ground, I know exactly where you are at all times. I know what you as the user, did you go left or did you go right? Did you touch an object because it was shiny, or did you avoid it because it was, some other characteristic? And so now we can start to track the behavior of a learner or a participant in the game, and maybe change that behavior through the kind of things that we put out there on the scene. So in typical gaming, you want to complete a level so you can move to the next level, and we can absolutely do all that. But I just use physics as an easy way to make objects come alive. And then, like I said, from the technical side, you just apply physics to a sphere and now it will bounce down the road. So if it bounced, the other thing is time, that's a huge function of Unity. Everything is measured in cycles of time. Everything's always happening because it's real time. So if a user took 3 minutes to complete a task the first time, I can absolutely check if they took 1 minute to complete it the second time. And if they don't, that's where I can provide the reinforcing knowledge object. So you get into traditional e-learning. At that point, I see, Eric, you're not picking up the right object. You keep making the mistake with the wrench or something. Let me show you a video. I can just project a video in the scene, or I can, and I will say that the other exciting part of Unity is that all of these messages can actually go through xAPI out to the real world, if you will, the IoT world, and can send you emails or can trigger a light in an environment. I mean, I think that it's really, at the end of the day, it's just the front end interface for connecting with what a learner does in a whole new vocabulary of actions. We all know click and drag. We all know answer A, B, and C. And now we can say, and how about a physically based, time-based interaction of anything you can dream of? Does that help with a little bit of the physics? Yeah.
Yeah, that helps. Well, thank you so much. I really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. Enjoyed.
So we will talk to you soon, but now I'm
Thank
going to
you.
move to Judy. And Judy, you are on Team Pebble. Can you tell us a little bit about that mystery team?
Absolutely. So can you hear? Okay. I thought I
Yeah,
was double
you're
muted
good.
for a sec. Okay. So first of all, we have to do full disclosure here. Kristen was actually on Team Pebble as well, so I can tell y'all that it was super. It was thrilling to come in with like an idea already of what I wanted to do, which I definitely have not always done in the xAPI cohort. I've participated a couple of times, but over the past year, I started working with a company called EduWorks. Actually, today is my 1-year anniversary. And so I started working on a really exciting project called Pebble, which is an ADL funded activity provider. Woohoo, more activity providers that are super cool. So we were reaching the stage in the project where I really wanted to get, some other ideas, some outside, thinking into the project. And it's an open source, community-based kind of thing. But since EduWorks is the company that really has the ADL contract, most of the ideas come from within, right? And so it was at a stage where I just wanted to get other people looking at it, and working with it and see what happened. And have a project based on what, that followed people's passion about it, whatever inspired them. And I was lucky enough to have somebody who was so inspired by it that they wanted to be the team leader. Now I know that you're just a leader type person, Kristen. But
like telling people what to do.
that also helps, right? But that was a fantastic experience for me to be able to come in, and there were, I was, again, with this one company doing, most of the work, I anticipated having to sort of lead the effort, and whatever. And so it was great to come in and have some people really inspired by it and want to pick up, a bunch of different aspects of leading the work and doing the work and whatever. And I could sort of be the Pebble subject matter expert. And so that was a really fantastic experience.
And it is, if people want to know more, is it pebbleproject?
Let me go ahead and put the link in here. It's Pebble Solutions. Oh, so there are a couple of different websites, by the way. And so everyone right now, I want you to go sign up at this link right now, because this is, if you want to get involved in Pebble, we can pop the other links in later. But that is. The one that I just put in there is, if you want to get involved with Pebble in any way, or just kind of keep up to date with what's going on, then you can sign up. And Pebble is at this stage. One of the reasons that this was really, oops, I didn't get to actually put that in there, but one of the reasons that I wanted to take this to the cohort at this point is that Pebble is kind of transitioning from becoming this thing where, one group is just working on the code, to more of a product, more of a user-centered product, with an authoring, interface and everything like that. So we're in the process of that. So it was really time to get other people involved. And if anybody's interested in kind of getting involved in that effort, you can sign up there. We also will continue to run a team through the cohort, for sure. So it's always intended to be a community-based project. And this has been a fantastic community to respond to it.
And Helena, who's in the chat,
Yes.
was also on the team. So is Cassandra, who I don't think is here, but Cassandra's here. Take a look at the links to see more about Pebble. But basically, it's a way of taking ebook content or just written content and making it interactive and then trackable in that way. So I really liked it. The reason I was drawn to it is that it's such the opposite of the way many authoring tools are going. And it's a good reminder sometimes to just say, like, hey, here's some content that needs some, scientifically backed, evidence-based ways of engaging with it and checking understanding. And it's just like it's like the essence of e-learning. And I really, really liked it. And I liked the experience.
Right. Oh, I think the same thing, and it was kind of the same thing that we're probably going to go over. But I think that a lot of tools really focus on, okay, how pretty can I make this, and how many ways can I make things move around on screen, and those things do have value, but they don't necessarily speak to the things that we scientifically know work for learning, the things that are kind of time tested, like reading, reading and taking notes or highlighting a text, and ebooks can do that, but then they don't have all of the interactivity that we know really works for learning. And so Pebble is an attempt to combine those things that really work, and just the combination of features that other authoring tools don't have, and that we know. I'm going to repeat myself, that we know work, like social interactions and things like that, and retrieval practice. That really drew me to it. It was kind of like, oh, hey, if Wonk's built a tool, this is the tool, and it's going to be instrumented with really great xAPI too. So that's really cool. So,
yeah. Okay, I'm having trouble getting Brian Floyd on the screen. So I was just trying to figure out that. But so if it works, we'll hear from Brian. But I can tell you that he did this incredible project with JavaScript and Captivate. And I feel like on our last presentation call, everyone came in with like, I made this, it's good, it's not perfect, here are the things I want to do. And Brian just like blew us away with this amazing presentation. So if you can talk just for a couple minutes about what you did, Brian, if it leaves you on, you're muted now. I'm always scared to unmute people on calls. I'm going to do it. Oh, it's not going to work. Interesting. Interesting. Well, Brian, if you can, in the chat, do a quick intro if the muting. Let me try one more time. I'm clicking toggle mic. It's not working. Okay. If you know sign language, if you can just do a quick. So I'm going to let you play with that. I'm going to leave you on screen. If you can figure that out. J-Rock said it might be the mic settings. We can't hear you. Yeah. But maybe if you disconnect the mic and reconnect it, it might trigger it. It's not letting me toggle you. But while we do that, I'm also going to ask all of the group representatives to post in the chat what their next steps are, because I don't think we're going to get to that part. So post in the chat what your group's next steps are for the cohort. And I also want to, you could hear, I'm going to disconnect you and reconnect you. This is the kind of problem solving that we all do in the xAPI cohort. So there is a green button on the bottom. I'm not like contracted by Megan to get people to join, but I wanted to make it easy. If you want to join the spring cohort, there is a button on the bottom that'll take you right to it. Yes, so J-Rock is explaining, he made a wrapper file to get Captivate information to xAPI. It was amazing. It was really, really well done. He was, throughout the cohort, like this jolt of energy. He would post these long, super technical, super smart explanations of things in Slack, and we would all learn a lot. And that's a good example of why I appreciated doing the cohort. So we I like to talk about what obstacles we ran into. So I asked everyone to give me the biggest blockers that they faced throughout the cohort. And I had a couple of, let's see. Say something, Brian. I hear you. I hear shuffling.
Can you guys hear me? Because I can't hear you. That's the problem. So can you hear me though?
We can hear you.
If you could give me like a thumbs up. I can hear you fine. Okay, so you can hear me, and I know what the question is. I guess we won't have a lot of interaction, but maybe I can talk to my project. I don't know what happened there. Everything was fine, but then as soon as you asked me to go live, I can't hear you guys, but apparently you can hear me. So real quickly, my project was for Adobe Captivate. Kind of the catalyst for it was we had used Captivate for years at work, but we kind of had a new use for it. I'm the director of training for Bear Paint, and we wanted a way to go to Home Depot associates, which there's about 40,000 of, with our reps and our iPads, and just give them a quick interactive thing with our new products, be able to capture some feedback. Did they understand the learning, that sort of thing? And of course, xAPI was the best way to do that. So we did a few of these, and what I found was that each time that we were doing it, I was having to kind of rewrite the code that was embedded with Captivate, and it was kind of painstaking. And then also I was the one that had to do it because of my level of understanding of xAPI. My other designers weren't really able to do it. So I was like, well, could I develop something that we could just plug into every Captivate package moving forward so that we wouldn't have to do custom code every time? We just publish the package, put the wrapper on it, and let it go from there. And then kind of the metamorphosis from there was, well, couldn't the rest of the world use the same package? So that really was the catalyst for the project, was how do we save time, continue to do these projects? And then the other thing too, with xAPI that I find a lot of times is, when you're custom coding it, you do it a little bit different this time than you did last time, and you don't catch that until you're about 150 statements in, and now I've got bogus data or data that doesn't align. So having this wrapper was a way to really add consistency to what we were doing, making sure we were using the same methodology every single time. And then the other question that I've gotten a lot about this project is, why not just use the xAPI that Captivate has built in? The reason being for that was, first of all, I'm pretty tech savvy. I couldn't figure it out. Like, I tried and tried and tried to make it work natively with the way that they had it. I couldn't get it to do it, but I'm very JavaScript savvy, very Captivate savvy. So I kind of figured out my own way to do it. And then I looked at what the Captivate, if I could have figured it out, what kind of stuff would that give me? And it was some stuff, but it was very squirmy, I think was a way I heard someone describe it. And there's a lot of other things that happen with the user that beyond what SCORM can give us, that the Captivate listeners or Captivate, I'm blanking out on the word I need. It's what happens when you get up at 3:30 to catch a flight. The Captivate built-in JavaScript handlers can basically tell you, event listeners, that's what I'm looking for. The event listeners that were in there could fire off the statements for a lot of different things. And then the other part that was really neat too was going and like video, they really didn't have much for video, like maybe that you had a video on the screen would be, but it wouldn't tell you if you played it, paused it, scrubbed it, did any of that sort of stuff. So that was kind of a neat part of the project too, was dissecting Captivate and figuring out how they put the video on the screen using HTML, and then kind of pulled apart that HTML to listen to it rather than actually using the Captivate listener. So a lot of different aspects of the project. Again, I can't hear you, so if you have anything else for me, I'm not really sure where to go, but I think I'll just turn it back to you and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close now just to, we'll talk in the chat, and now you can probably hear us again. Okay, so in the chat, you can see almost everyone's next steps. Everyone can also put in their advice. I asked everyone beforehand for their blockers and obstacles, and then their takeaways. I definitely want to talk about blockers and obstacles. And the one that I found most interesting, and I'm going to invite J-Rock and Izzy and Laura and Judy, I'm going to kick you off. The one that I found the most interesting was, and also really useful for people who are thinking about joining or doing any project like this, is the need to learn about things that are not xAPI. So you go into something like this and you think, okay, I'm going to learn about xAPI. But all the people on the screen here, including me, because I was learning Pebble, had to learn other stuff too. So you heard J-Rock talk a little bit about having to learn D&D, something people spend their entire middle school years doing in a 3-month cohort. But Izzy and Brian, do you guys want to talk a little bit about what you had to learn in addition to xAPI to make this work?
Yeah, so as we kind of said earlier, Brian was very familiar with VoiceFlow because he had been on other Alexa projects prior to this one. This was my first Alexa project, so I had to learn this VoiceFlow platform, which the best way to explain it is sort of like a mind mapping tool. You kind of drag and drop things out onto a platform, onto a screen, and then you kind of connect things together. And that's how sort of the flow, you sort of create the entire flow of the voice flow, I guess it is. But like understanding what the different pieces, what the different components do, and then also understanding the interface. For me, I had to use this integration block that was relatively new. I had a lot of issues troubleshooting that. Sometimes I would send stuff out there, I'd get an error back. Other times I would get no error, but I also wouldn't get anything in the LRS. So it was a lot of just like, is it the platform? Is it the LRS? Where is the problem happening? So thankfully, VoiceFlow has a great Facebook community that I could reach out to, and they helped a lot.
Kristen, you're on mute. We didn't get a word of that.
I am on mute. That was very kind of me while Izzy was talking. So
I'm sure it was very profound, though.
Oh, it was perfect. So you were layering online communities to kind of help solve this problem for this one, which I like a lot. But you also, your goal in doing that was to avoid using Zapier, which is kind of like easy mode for sending xAPI statements and can get really expensive. If you don't have a Zapier license, you're limited to not nearly enough connections. So you guys did end up getting it to go straight from VoiceFlow to the LRS eventually?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Very good.
I was able to remove the whole Zapier step entirely, so that was really exciting. It took a lot of time to get that to work, but yes, I was very proud of the fact that I was able to get rid of that.
Yeah, that is and that's something that came up a little bit in the takeaways too. So I wanted to let you speak to that while we're on it. Your takeaways were planning ahead was a big one, but then that's getting things directly into LRS.
Yeah, and also like I had played around with 2 different LRSs because, as I said, sometimes I would troubleshoot things, and sometimes I would send a statement to one LRS, and then to verify whether it was the statement or whether it was the LRS was the problem, I had a different LRS that I'd also send statements to. And when I sent it to one, I get an error. When I sent it to the other, I wouldn't get an error, and I'd be like, that's odd. What is going on here? As it turns out, not all of the LRSs are, they don't all adhere as strictly to the xAPI profile as they should. So as an example, sometimes I'd send, this was when I was trying to create like an ID, a registration ID. It would get sent, it had to be in a very specific format called the UUID. In some cases, it would, for one LRS, I think it was StormCloud, it would let me use anything. Like I could put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in there and it would accept it. For Watershed, it complained basically because it said you didn't create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not a UUID, so you're not following the proper format. So it was very strict about following the exact xAPI profile, and I appreciated that. But that took a while to find out.
Yeah, that's a really good method to set up 2 different LRSs. I've used the same thing to figure out where your problem lies. What did you end up using? You're saying StormCloud had more issues.
Right. We did end up using Watershed. That was the one we were kind of leaning towards anyway. So that was our primary one. Yeah.
Okay. And you can always get that list from, is it just the xAPI website of conformance software?
Yes.
That shares all the time.
Right. Yeah.
And that is really, really helpful. Gigi said, make sure you allow for time commitment. That is very, very true. And I put in here constantly rescope. Just constantly look at what you bit off and what you feel like you can actually comfortably chew during this. We are also working around people's work commitments, and those obviously change. And obviously, not that anything's more important than the xAPI cohort, but usually your work commitments are going to win. So I do want to talk a little bit. I'm going to kick all of you out and talk about the need for more diverse team construction. So I'm going to bring in Joanne and Brian. And they had both talked a little bit about the just the need for more diversity of skills on teams. And I thought, Joanne, you had some really interesting comments about that. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you faced?
Well, yeah, for me with like the early childhood education, it's just the technology itself is, we're not working with the LMS anymore. You're really off. And so I just feel like we really need to get designers, software developers, the venture capitalists, and those to also join in, because it's like we're really focused on the xAPI. And I think that's where our expertise is coming in. What is the data and things? But then it's like the technologies that drive it. And so it's like, I really feel like if we could get more of the subject matter experts and the technology experts that can help us, that we could work together with, I think that would really make the cohorts grow. And then also too, it's like more jobs getting created from this, because it's just, there's so much promise with xAPI. And I just feel like we just start to need to get more people involved to really make this industry grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really liked how you said that. And yours does kind of venture off more into the not really our traditional applications of xAPI as we tend to think of it in our like departments or just company-wide learning departments.
Right. And like the Internet of Things is really going to open up, and like JavaScript really is a backbone of a lot of that too. And so the skill sets that we're developing here, and it's like, I look at all the other projects, and it's like, the ebooks, like to be able to use those in the early learning childhood, just to be able to have like, here's a dog, what does a dog sound like, and bring in that audio, bring in the videos. And it's just all of the applications, even JRock's going through the mindset of like, okay, what is the dungeon dragging thinking? It's the same as like an autistic child, like they don't have the communication skills. How can we get at that thought process? And he designed like a communication board. That's how I see it, And so I'm just looking at the other projects, and like Brian with all of the statements, and it was just, I felt like I learned from him to make my statements better, and really, like what he said about the parent and how he used the parent. It was just like a lightning, and I was just like, oh my goodness, and so that's why I really feel like this cohort and the knowledge share and the people sharing, and helping you out is incredible. And it's just an experience that I think everyone should really go through, project-based learning.
That's great. And I like that you mentioned designers and totally outside people. So if you have someone who has a skill set and is not part of your, e-learning community, I liked how many people I didn't recognize in the cohort.
And bring a friend. Bring a friend outside of e-learning.
People, yeah. Anyone who knows anything that would work with this. And I think, Brian, you'd mentioned your project really required technical skills.
It did, but I felt like I had the technical skills. What I didn't have was a lens other than my own for how I use Captivate, right? So the way that I design a Captivate, I only know one way. I wasn't formally trained. I just figured it out on my own. I don't use table of contents. I don't use the play bar. I don't use a lot of elements that probably a lot of people do. So I was really hoping that I would get, oh, this is great, and I did get some of that. I got a couple of ideas that I never would have thought of without the cohort. Like one of the ones that was actually a really easy add and I thought kind of pretty valuable, was focused and unfocused, because we know a lot of times people leave an e-learning and go check their email while a video is playing or things like that. And that just never even occurred to me until someone mentioned it. I'm like, I bet you I could do that. And so I did. But I really had hoped that more people would say, well, what about this is my use case and this is my use case, and I tried to apply it. And also, to Joanne's point, one of the things that I'm not going to say frustrate, that's not the right word, a little disappointing to me is like I've got Slack as a desktop app, and I'm just waiting for that thing to ping, for the next comment to be made, for the next and it gets pretty quiet during cohort, which is disappointing to me, because I feel like there's a few of us out there that are a wealth of knowledge and have done a ton of stuff and want to grow the community and want to help. And I feel like there's a million questions, but people just don't ask. And I don't know if it's because, and I get it. I mean, I was at that point too with xAPI 3-4 years ago, where I'm like, this is so overwhelming. I don't understand. I think every question I have is foolish. I seem so far behind the curve, but I get that. And I'm totally like, I want to help people, because once you kind of get over that hill, it's like, wow, what's next, right? And I'm still there 3 or 4 years later. I mean, when I went to Torrance Learning's cohort party, I learned about 3 parts of xAPI that I never knew anything about, which was state, agent profile, and activity profile. What powerful tools. I didn't even know they existed, right? So as advanced as I may seem, I'm still learning as well. So I hope people get more involved, ask more questions. There are no stupid questions, and we're all here to help each other. So, especially like the team beginners, it seems like they're just looking for someone to give them what they need. And I'm here for you guys. I'll give you whatever you want. Just ask, right? But I don't want to push myself on you either. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, and you did a very good job in Slack, being very available, trying to spur that conversation. And that's actually a very good time to mention the unanimous advice that I got in our preparation document, was just join. It doesn't matter if you don't have time to do it. I hear a lot of people, whenever xAPI cohort is brought up, saying, oh yeah, I signed up for that once and I never really did anything with it. And I had this weird thought in the back of my head, because I'd done that twice, that Megan was mad at me. In my head, I was like, I think Megan's probably mad at me for this. I took a spot in her Slack. That's not a thing. Just join, be in Slack. If there's no group that really speaks to you that time, it doesn't matter. Just don't do it that time. Just be in Slack and listen, go to whatever calls you can make. Just be present there. And then the next time, maybe that'll be when you have an idea for a group, and then you'll have a better idea of the structure. Izzy had mentioned that he had lurked for 2 times, I think, before he actually joined anything. So they kick you off of Slack every round, I think. Your Slack membership doesn't necessarily get renewed. So just join, download Slack, put it on your desktop, use it for the TLDC community too. And then you have 2 communities pinging you all day long. Probably use it for work. And yeah, I use it for work, so I'm constantly there anyway. So yes, join if you are at all interested in it. If you guys, any of the panel people who want to, if you want to put in any way for people to contact you or learn more if they want to, you don't have to, but if you want to be a resource for people who might have questions outside of this, please go ahead and put whatever contact information. And I really appreciate you all joining. I think I asked everyone a little peek behind the curtain, Thursday, because it was the new year and I thought, oh crap. And everyone was like, yeah, sounds great. Izzy and Brian are on the West Coast. Brian Floyd was on a plane this morning and everyone was very available. And I think that's a really good, it's just a really good metaphor for how the xAPI community is in general. Everyone is just willing to do what they can to push things forward. So I appreciate what you guys did today. I appreciate what you guys did throughout the cohort. I think most of these teams are still going in spring. So please join and join us. And I'm always available if you guys have any questions for me. But thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Okay. All right, take care. Bye-bye. Join the cohort.
Just join it.
Yeah, do it.
Bye.